Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge. It's actually the morning. I don't know why I said afternoon, but it's the morning. Maybe for some of you it's the afternoon, but I am back with another Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge. If you are tuning in live here on Behance today, let me know in the chat who you are and where you're tuning in from. We've got Paula and Sam and Frank, Clarissa, Leanne, Patricia, Jody, Nathan, Ted, Susan, Katrina, Jennifer, Charles, Gareth, great to see. Okay, well, hold on. Noor, sound okay. Okay, Noor scared me. Yesterday we had some sound problems. I saw sound all in caps and I got scared, but we're good. Megan and Claudie, great to see everyone. Rick and Jody from cloudy Seattle. You know, it's funny. I always hear about cloudy Seattle. The only time I was in Seattle was about a week. It was 2 years ago, I think. It was for about a week and didn't see a cloud the entire time. It was perfectly sunny. It was beautiful. I don't know what you're all talking about. Anyways, let's go ahead and hop over to my screen. We're gonna get going for day number 3 of the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge. If you're new to this whole shindig, let me give you a quick breakdown. Every single day, you're gonna receive a challenge. Monday to Friday, except the first Monday. The first 2 weeks are live, so I'm real. I'm actually responding to all of you lovely people. The second 2 weeks are replays. So if you want to catch up on some of the challenges you may have missed, or you want to revisit the challenges, you can definitely do that during the next 2 weeks. You can join us in our Discord community chat. I'll get to that in a moment. Watch us live. I'm live 9 o'clock Pacific time every single day during these challenges. And then you can share your work either on Behance using the keyword PS Daily Challenge, or if I hop over to good old Discord, we have 2,379 people online right now. Hop in here. It's a wonderful community of great people, great designers and artists. Over to the left, we have a bunch of channels. You can get information about the daily challenges. Tim's been doing a great job at posting all those every morning. You can ask questions, share tips and tricks, but more importantly, if you are participating in these challenges, definitely hop into the challenge channel right over here. Looks like some people are already taking part in today's challenge, and oh my gosh, look at this. I'll show you the template we're going to be using in just a moment, but keep note of that. Crazy. A unicorn, or whatever this thing is. It's a beautiful creature. Don't know what it is. I think it's a unicorn. No, maybe it's not. I don't know. And a lot of people are participating in the neon challenge from yesterday. Look at this cute dog. Isn't that cute? And then we have a horse up there. I'm going to call it a unicorn as well. It's probably not, but I'm going to call it a unicorn. Earth. I wish we had one of these like glowing things around Earth. That would be cool. Great job, everyone. All right. So if I scroll down, little recap of what we've done this week so far. So we started on Tuesday exploring select and mask and how to extract objects from their background. A Pegasus, that could be it. It's still a unicorn in my mind. Yesterday we tackled glow effects and we added neon lighting to photographs using layer styles and shapes and all sorts of different things. That was photoshopped in. I would hope so, because I don't think that creature exists, but maybe one day with some weird genetic modification. And then today we're going to be tackling photo editing. We're going to be decluttering photos of unwanted objects using all sorts of healing methods. And then if we have a little bit of time, I'm going to show you how to also edit a person's face and get rid of things like acne and pimple and stuff like that. All right. So if you haven't yet, go ahead and hit that Get Started button right here. Download that file to your computer. Pop it open in Photoshop, and if you want to re-watch this at any point in the future, you can press the Watch Video button. So let's go ahead and hop over to Photoshop. Boop, there we go. And this is the template for today. Murray from Brampton, Ontario, great to see you. I grew up not too far from there. So over to the left, we are going to have our welcome card, and the prompt is here. Again, the challenge is to remove unwanted objects from your photos using healing and clone stamp tools. And over to the right, whoops, I've included some images we can practice on. Now, as I mentioned in the past few challenges, if you feel comfortable and if you have photos at your disposal, definitely feel free to use those as well. But these are here if you definitely want to practice. And I should mention, if you want something a little bit different and you don't have your photos, head on over to Adobe Stock, stock.adobe.com, and there is a completely free section right here at the top, and you can search for something like beach, and you'll get a ton of images, 19,000 free images of beaches, and here's the one that I actually licensed for this tutorial. So you can grab that or grab any of the ones you want. And very quickly, if anyone's an XD user, I know some of my XD viewers are here, I did upload a new tutorial this morning, so check on YouTube and that will be there. All right, so here we go. We are going to start the process on this beach photo, and essentially, you know, a little bit different than what this user did in Discord, which is amazing, by the way. In this photo here that we're on now, what we want to do is, you know, remove the people in the photo. We might want to keep the umbrellas and the chairs and things like that, but we might want to get rid of the distracting people. So we're going to start exploring a few different healing methods. Now, if I go ahead and select this beach photo from the right-hand side in my properties and layers panel, I'm going to go ahead and grab a few healing tools. So in the tools bar, we have the clone stamp, for example. We also have over here the object selection tool. We have a bunch of selection tools that we can potentially use. We also have spot healing brush, patch tool, content aware, move tool, a lot of fun stuff that we're going to try to use at our disposal. Now, the most common tool is probably the clone stamp. Even though typically I don't use it as much these days, that's probably the most common one. Now, one thing I want to note is if you were to grab the clone stamp, again, it's over here to the left-hand side, shortcut key S. What you're going to do is Photoshop is going to want you to sample an area. And when you do that, I'm going to make my brush smaller using the left square bracket key. And I'm going to hold down my Alt key on Windows or Option key on the Mac. And you're going to click on an area to sample. And essentially, you're basically telling Photoshop that it's going to sample that area, and you'll be able to use that sample to heal out or clone out the subject. And you can right click to access your brush panel, make it softer or harder. In this case, a softer brush should work well. And if you sample and then start brushing, you're gonna notice it clones that person out, right? Looks great. However, what we just did there is very, very destructive. As you can tell in the layers panel, we still have one layer. So if we wanted to go back and put that person back in there, can't really do that unless we undo. But if you close the document, open it up again, you're out of luck. So instead, what I recommend as much as possible is to work on new layers. So right at the bottom of your layers panel, you can go ahead and create a new layer, this plus button right down here. You can also use the Command and Control Shift and N key, and that's going to create a new layer as well. And with the clone stamp activated, what you want to do is at the top where it says sample, you want to choose all layers or current and below depending on the situation, but right now all layers is fine. So even though we're on a completely blank layer, we can still use the clone stamp and sample from the layer below. So again, I'm going to hold down Alt or Option, click, and then brush out that subject, right? And as you can tell here, it's applied it to that layer, which is amazing. So I can hide it if I want to, I can show it, I can also apply layer masks, and we might get to that in a moment. Let's do one more using the clone stamp. Again, holding down Alt or Option to sample, and it's usually a good idea to create a new sample as you're getting to new areas. If I were to keep, even though in this beach photo on the water, it's probably going to be fine if I still use that same sample. It's always a good idea to resample something a little bit closer to the subject. Clarissa says, did not know this. Yes, non-destructive editing, especially when you're healing and things like that, such a time saver. It's amazing. So that's the clone stamp. Very simple. It's been in Photoshop for quite a while, but since it was introduced, there's been a lot more healing tools. And let's go over a few more. So right above the clone stamp, two more above, we have our spot healing brush, and we have our healing brush and our patch tool, a lot of different tools. Let's try the spot healing brush. Now, the spot healing brush is typically good for smaller elements or smaller areas on a photo. So let's go, this guy over here. Hopefully he's okay, floating in the ocean over there. It's not too deep, but hopefully he's okay. So with the spot healing brush tool active, shortcut key J, and by the way, if you want to cycle between these various tools, you would hold down your shift key and keep pressing J, and it would cycle between those various tools that are inside of that flyout, right? Now this one's kind of cool. So you remember a few moments ago, we used the clone stamp and we had to hold down Alt or Option, click to sample, and then brush. The spot healing brush gets rid of the whole sampling process. So at the top, I do have sample all layers selected, which is going to sample the layers below as well. And all I'm going to do is just brush over the subject I want to remove and let go. It did a pretty good job, right? And there's a bunch of different things you can do with coloring if things don't match that well, but for the most part, it looks pretty good. And I can brush over this one over here and it removes it. Fancy, right? So essentially what's happening is when you brush over top of that subject, Photoshop is going to automatically look around your sample, or in this case, it's a brush, right? It's going to look at all the different pixels that's around there, the textures and the colors and all that fun stuff, and it's going to apply that to the best of their ability, or its ability, I don't know what Photoshop is, to the subject, and it's going to heal it out really nicely. So again, it's good for smaller areas. I can just brush like this. I can also, just like I did with my brush, increase the hardness if I needed to. And you're going to see this if we get to the example with the person with acne. It's very simple to just brush out these areas. Now, there is also the healing brush tool. Now, this works very similar to the clone stamp, but it uses content-aware fill and content-aware technology to give you a much better healing, right? So if I make my brush smaller one more time and make it nice and soft, this one, if I were to simply start to brush, it's going to look for a sample. So I'm going to hold down Alt or Option, click, and then sample away. And you're going to notice as I'm doing that, it's actually, it's not necessarily taking the sample and putting it on top of that subject. It's actually, healing to the best of its ability. So it's, making sure it blends really nicely in addition to using that sample. So I'm going to sample this area here and brush, and there's going to be so many different scenarios where the healing brush may work better than the clone stamp, and the clone stamp may work better than the spot healing brush. And a lot of it is just, sampling an area and brushing and seeing what happens. And you can go back and forth between so many different tools until you find the one that works best. But you can kind of see what's happening, right? The colors are changing so that things are blending in really nicely. And as you continue brushing, even once the subjects are gone, you're going to notice it's really, trying its best to blend that area quite nicely. And if we zoom out, it's looking pretty good. There are a few different areas where we might want to smooth it out just a touch more, but for the most part, it's looking good. Should each subject be on a separate layer? You could, Ted, but what's nice is, that all that data is still there. So I could add a layer mask right here at the bottom. We talked about layer masks yesterday. So I can add that layer mask, and with a black or a black brush, I can brush with my B key. I can brush some of those subjects back in. So you can absolutely, especially if you're working on, very intense and, high definition projects, you can absolutely put them on separate layers. It depends. All right, so that is the healing brush, the spot healing brush, and the clone stamp. Another tool that I find very useful sometimes is right in here, the patch tool. And with the patch tool, as of a few years ago, it has a content aware option, which is wonderful, right? So what we're gonna do is, if you're familiar with the patch tool, you want to basically use a marquee selection to, trace over. That's the word I'm looking for. Trace over the subject. So this woman here, I'm going to trace over her, and I'm going to leave room on the edges, right? I don't want to go right to her body, because that won't give Photoshop enough data to use. It might work in some cases, but you want to give a little bit of a border there. And you can use the patch tool or the marquee tools to create this selection as well. And once you do that, you're going to notice this little icon, right? And that's letting you know that you want to drag this selection to an area that contains data that you want to replace your subject with. So let me explain that. If I were to grab this selection and drag it to this area here, I'm going to tell Photoshop to sample this area, this new area that I'm dragging on top of, and use that data to heal out our subject, right? And it's in real time, so you can really help Photoshop line up everything really nicely. And I'm gonna let go, and it healed it out. It didn't do a bad job, right? It didn't do a great job, but what you can do now is right at the top, we have structure and color. And as you can tell by the little tooltips, it adjusts how strictly the source structure is preserved. So things like that. If we want more flexibility on the color, if I undo this, I can go to, let's try 7, drag this over. So the color blends a little bit more nicely. Structure probably won't work in this situation. Probably don't want to bump it up, but it's not bad. Right? And then of course, once you've done this and you get rid of your larger objects, then you can grab, let's say, the healing brush tool and just kind of blend out those edges, just to kind of rough it up a little bit, just so it doesn't look like something was there, right? There we go. Perfect. Now we can do the same thing for this guy over here. So one more time, patch tool, just draw around him like this, leaving a little bit of room. There is a bit of a shadow there, so I'm going to include that. And then I'll drag it to an area. Let's go this way. And there he goes. He's gone. Again, you can use your healing brush tool to, rough it up and blur it out a little bit, but it works pretty well. All right, let's take a look at another example. I'm not going to sit here and go through every single person, but this user, he did, and it turned out amazing. So in this, actually not this one, we'll get to that one shortly. But in this photo here, it's a great photo, but we might want to remove the woman walking up the stairs, because maybe it's a photo for a real estate company or something like that, and just took it at the wrong time. So very similar to our last example, we are going to create a new layer to work non-destructively on. And we can start at the bottom of this photo and essentially try out various tools. So if we hop into our clone stamp, shortcut key S, we can go ahead and sample this. Let me really zoom in here. We can sample this area with the cracks on the concrete. And I love the way that Photoshop really shows us in real time what, how things are going to line up and what it's going to be sampling. And I can just kind of brush it away. So I can go over here, brush this away, and it looks pretty good. And again, unlike the healing brush tools, the clone stamp doesn't use content-aware technology. So it's literally taking the sample plus your hardness level of the brush and just plopping it onto the subject. So in some cases like this, where there's a lot of texture and things like that, the clone stamp should work pretty well, right? But in other cases, you might want to go for something like the healing brush. But let's go ahead and switch over to the healing brush. Right over here. The spot healing brush, in this case, likely won't work very well because it's a very large subject, right? So we'll probably want to avoid that. But if we go to the healing brush tool, which allows us to sample an area just like the clone stamp, holding an Alt Option, clicking, you're going to notice it's a little bit different this time. It takes longer for that subject to disappear, but Photoshop is doing its best to really blend it in quite nicely and make sure that, it doesn't look exactly like the sample, but it also has some of the same textures and colors and things like that. So I can keep brushing it out, and as I do it, the subject is very slowly going away, but we're left with a lot of really nice textures and all that fun stuff, right? Let's go back to the clone stamp, shortcut key S. And sometimes it might be good to start with the clone stamp just to get the bulk of the subject out of the photo, and then switch over to the healing brush so you can blend a little bit nicer, right? So this area here, it doesn't look bad, right? But if I go to my healing brush now, I can just kind of brush over top of it just to get some variation. Because one thing you'll definitely notice when you're using the clone stamp, because it's literally taking the sample and popping it on top of the subject, you'll notice a lot of repetition sometimes. Patterns will be repeated and things like that. You may not want that. So using the healing brush, it's going to help you avoid some of that. There we go. I'm just going to brush over this very quickly. And you can really tell, aside from me blabbering on here, how quickly healing can actually be done in Photoshop once you get the hang of it. Once you understand which tools do what, you can really go through and just, blast through this and get rid of subjects quite quickly. All right. So hopefully by now you're all getting the idea and you're all kind of figuring out which tools do what. And you can switch again. I'm going to switch over to my healing brush, shortcut key J. There we go. So if I zoom out, I didn't finish the entire thing, but you can definitely, see an improvement. Now, zooming out is always a good idea because when you're zoomed in, things look sometimes better than they actually are. But when you zoom out, you can start to see a little bit of imperfection, maybe in this area here. So I'm going to just grab my healing brush and brush over top of that just to help kind of blend that out a little bit, right? There we go. Perfect. Looking pretty good. Got a little bit of a, her head's kind of poking up at there. We'll get to that if I had a little bit more time. But I do want to touch on one more example, and that is this one here. And, we've all kind of been in this situation. We've got things on our face that we might not necessarily want. Taking professional photos and, woke up with a zit or something like that. Same techniques apply here. I'm going to create one more new layer. And, for acne and zits and things like that, we probably want to go for the spot healing brush. I'm going to make it a little bit larger, zoom on in, and simply click. There we go. And click, and click, and click. And sometimes, depending on what's around it, you might have to click a few times. You might have to click and drag. You might want to increase the hardness a little bit. But look how quickly you can actually go through and start healing out imperfections on someone's face. And if you find areas where there's just too much going on, then that's an area where you might want to switch over to the healing brush so you can actually sample, so that you're really instructing Photoshop what to use when you're healing, right? And you don't have to be perfect. You can leave a few behind, because none of us are perfect. But the healing brush works really well here because it'll also look at the skin texture, it'll look at the color, and it'll really do a pretty good job at getting rid of a lot of that acne and pimple, right? And I'm just kind of rushing through it, but you're really noticing what an improvement it's done. And if I zoom out and I turn off this layer and turn it back on, not too bad. So let me finish up in the last few minutes. Just go through. I see Rick's comment about the Nirvana album. I saw the guy was suing Nirvana after all these years. I don't know what to think about that. That's quite interesting. I did also see another question somewhere. While I have a second, I thought I saw a question. Maybe not. Possibly not. Oh, what kind of microphone do you use? I use the Shure SM7B. It's this guy. You probably can't see it. It's kind of tied down to the boom arm, but it's a wonderful microphone, and I'm using Wirecast, and they have a mixer in there, so I have some noise reduction and a bunch of different things going on in Wirecast to, further amplify my voice, and hopefully it's coming through okay. I know yesterday we had some audio problems, but a good old restart solved that quite quickly. All right, There we go. And of course, there are neural filters, like I showed on Monday, I believe, that can help smooth out the skin. So if I very quickly convert this to a smart object by selecting both of these, we're going to go over smart objects in a, is it tomorrow or the day after? One of these days, we're going to go over smart objects. But if I go to our neural filters, like I showed you on Monday, there is a skin smoothing option. Now, some of you may not like skin smoothing. Some of you do, but it does a pretty good job, and it also keeps a lot of that texture of the person's skin. And of course, you can dial it in, you can dial it back a little bit if you want to, adjust smoothness and things like that. But it looks pretty good. All right, that is going to wrap it up for today. A big thank you to everyone who has tuned in live. Anika and Marcia and Steve and Sam and Mercurial. I love that name, it's a great name. Rick and Steve and Charles and Lena. Great to see you all. Stick around. We have, who do we have next? We have Lauren Jones coming up in just a few, or is it today? Hold on. Or is it Christina? Is Christina back again? I don't know. We have somebody coming up next. I can't read the schedule. It's not cooperating very well. But I'm going to be back tomorrow with another challenge to wrap up the week. Can't wait to see what you all do with today's challenge, and I'll see you all next time.